struggling single dad saved a life without knowing she was a billionaire woman. What she did will make you cry. It was just after 6 a.m. when the sky over Dayton, Ohio, cracked open with pale gray light, casting long shadows over the nearly empty gas station lot. The wind carried the sting of late October, sharp, dry, impatient. And there he stood, Daniel Brooks, 35, flannel shirt, oil-stained jeans, a weary calm in his eyes. He was wiping down the windshield of his old Chevy Silverado, hands calloused from years of roofing work and second jobs no one cared to ask about. Inside the truck, his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, still slept under her pink fleece blanket, curled like a question mark against the cold. Then he saw her, a woman, alone, pacing near the edge of the lot, designer coat torn at the shoulder, barefoot, breathing hard. Her eyes darted like a deer cornered in headlights. Something was wrong, but she wouldn't say. Daniel didn't ask questions. He just offered his flannel, wrapped it around her trembling arms, and said, "You're okay now. You're safe." He didn't know her name. He didn't know the black SUV idling nearby belonged to men who weren't there to help. And he definitely didn't know she had more money than he'd see in 100 lifetimes. All he knew was someone needed help, and he helped. That moment, quiet, unnoticed, was about to change his life in a way he never saw coming. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder. Goodness still exists. Stay with us. You won't want to miss what happens next. Daniel stood between her and the SUV now, just a man in worn-out boots and a borrowed minute of courage. The woman clutched his coat around her, wide-eyed and silent. The engine of the SUV purred low, like a predator waiting for the moment to strike. The driver stepped out. Black suit, shiny shoes, no smile. A Bluetooth earpiece blinked blue on his temple like a tiny threat. He didn't ask permission, just took a few steps forward. "She's fine. Come on, Ms. Hale. Let's not make a scene," the man said flatly, as if reading off a script. Ms. Hale didn't move. Daniel's voice was steady, but quiet. "She's not going anywhere if she doesn't want to." The man scoffed. "And who are you?" Daniel didn't answer. He just squared his shoulders. Behind him, Lily stirred in the truck. The man checked his watch, then his tone sharpened. "Look, I don't know what you think this is, but I work for her. She works for people a lot more important than you, so why don't you back off before you get in over your head?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't looking for a fight. He hated confrontation, had always avoided it if he could. But something about this didn't sit right. The woman wasn't nodding. She wasn't confirming anything. Her eyes kept flicking toward the woods behind the lot. "Then let her say so," Daniel said. The woman finally spoke. Just 3 words, hoarse and low. "I don't trust him." That was all it took. The man's jaw twitched. "Ma'am, we'll be in touch." And just like that, he was gone. The SUV pulled out, tires grinding over gravel, leaving a curl of dust and silence behind. Daniel let out the breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He turned to her slowly, hands open, gentle. "You okay?" She nodded. "Barely. I think so." The coat slipped off one shoulder, revealing a deep scratch along her arm. Blood, fresh and dark, ran down to her wrist. He guided her into the truck without another word. Lily blinked awake just long enough to ask, "Daddy? Who's she?" "Someone who needs help, baby. That's all." By 7 a.m., they were back in his apartment, the tiny 2-bedroom above the auto shop where Daniel sometimes worked nights fixing up cars for cash under the table. The heat barely worked. The coffee machine wheezed like it was gasping for its last breath, and the floor creaked with every step. But it was safe. She sat on the edge of the old corduroy couch, eyes scanning the room like she was still trying to make sense of it all. He handed her a mug of coffee. Burnt, bitter, but warm. "Name's Daniel. That's Lily. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. But if you need a place to rest for a bit, you're welcome here." She looked up, and for a moment, the fear in her eyes softened. "I'm Evelyn." He nodded, didn't flinch, didn't ask more. And yet, the questions buzzed at the edges of his mind. That car, that man, that name, Evelyn Hale. He'd heard it somewhere, but he didn't press. Instead, he stood in the doorway of the kitchen, quietly watching Lily draw hearts on a napkin with a broken crayon. His mind drifted, just for a moment, to the hospital bill sitting on the counter, the overdue notice from the electric company, the roofing job that fell through last week. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. There was no room for maybes in Daniel Brooks' life. Only now. Only what needs doing next. 3 hours later, Evelyn was gone. She left with a thank you and nothing more. No last name, no explanation, no number. Just the smell of her perfume still hanging in the room and the lingering question in Lily's voice. Will she be okay? Daniel hoped so, and life moved on. Because it had to. He packed Lily's lunch, dropped her at school, took a side job clearing debris off an old widow's roof, ate cold chili from a can in the truck, nodded politely at customers who couldn't see past the stains on his shirt. The days blurred together, until, 5 days later, a black Escalade rolled up outside the auto shop. The same kind. But this time, the man who stepped out wasn't the one from before. He wore a gray suit, expensive but understated, and his smile was tight but polite. Mr. Brooks. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and nodded cautiously. Yeah. I represent Ms. Evelyn Hale. She asked me to deliver this. He handed Daniel a white envelope. Heavy. The man turned to leave but paused. She also said, "Tell him I was right not to trust them. And thank him for saving my life." And then he was gone. Daniel opened the envelope with calloused fingers. Inside was a letter handwritten and a check. A check with more zeros than Daniel had ever seen in his life. He sat down on the curb outside the garage, stunned. The sunlight caught in his eyes, and for a long moment, the world felt still. In the letter, Evelyn told the truth. Who she was, why she ran, what she escaped from, and why, despite all her money, all her power, she had never met someone who gave so much without expecting anything in return. You saw me, she wrote. Not what I was worth, not who I belonged to. You just saw me, and that saved me. The community center gym smelled like sweat and old basketballs. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel stood in the corner, calloused hands tucked into his hoodie pockets, eyes scanning the crowd. The annual Dayton Strong fundraiser had just kicked off. Raffle tickets, bake sale tables, the usual. He wasn't here for any of it. He was just here for Lily. She was across the room, standing next to a paper snow cone stand she loved. Her laugh rang out, bright and unbothered. For a second, that was all that mattered. Then the microphone squealed, and everything changed. Good evening, everyone, came the smooth voice of Councilman Derek Langston, the man who ran most things in town, or at least thought he did. Let's take a moment to recognize the incredible generosity of one of Dayton's newest benefactors, Ms. Evelyn Hale. Daniel froze. He turned slowly, and there she was. Evelyn walked out onto the gym's makeshift stage in a fitted blazer and dark jeans. Hair pulled back, steady eyes. She looked unshaken, powerful, but not above anyone. The crowd murmured. People nudged each other. Is that the Evelyn Hale? Someone whispered. From Hale Tech? She's worth a fortune. Daniel didn't move. He couldn't. She cleared her throat and leaned into the mic. Hi, I'm Evelyn. A few weeks ago, something happened to me here in Dayton that changed the course of my life. And tonight, I want to introduce you to the man who made it possible for me to stand here. People shifted, looked around. Evelyn's eyes locked with his. Daniel Brooks, will you come up here, please? The room turned to stare at him. He hesitated. His chest tightened. His feet felt too heavy for the gym floor. But Lily had already grabbed his hand and looked up at him, beaming. Go, Daddy. So he did. Each step up the stage felt surreal. Evelyn offered her hand. He took it, rough fingers meeting manicured grace. And still, he said nothing. Evelyn smiled gently and turned back to the mic. Daniel didn't know who I was. He didn't know I was running from people I thought I could trust. He didn't ask me what I was worth or what I could offer. He just helped me, because it was the right thing to do. The crowd was silent now. You could hear the creak of the stage beneath their feet. People like Daniel are the reason this town has heart. So I've decided to invest in that heart. A collective inhale swept through the gym. I'm establishing the Brooks Foundation, Evelyn said. $1 million endowment for working-class single parents in Montgomery County. Starting with scholarships, housing support, and a full renovation of this community center. Gasps, applause, then a standing ovation. But Daniel? He just stood there, still grounded like he always had been. He leaned toward the mic, not to give a speech, just to say one thing. I didn't do anything special. Evelyn turned toward him. That's what made it special. Lily ran up to the stage, hugging her dad's leg as the applause grew louder. And in that moment, Daniel didn't feel small, didn't feel poor, didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. Not because of the money, not because of the spotlight, but because someone had finally noticed the quiet strength it took to show up every day and keep going. He looked out over the crowd, neighbors who'd passed him by 100 times without a glance. They looked back differently now, not with pity, but with respect. The applause eventually faded, but the silence that followed felt different, thicker somehow, warmer. In the gym, people stood a little straighter, quieter, like something sacred had just happened, and no one wanted to be the first to break it. Daniel stepped off the stage, holding Lily's hand. She bounced beside him, her snow cone forgotten, her eyes wide with pride. That was so cool, Daddy, she whispered, leaning into his side. He gave her hand a soft squeeze. He wasn't used to being looked at. Not like this. Not with admiration. As he walked past the raffle tables and folding chairs, the same folks who usually just nodded or passed him by now held his gaze. Some offered a handshake. Others just touched his arm as he passed, like they needed to feel the steadiness for themselves. Hey, Dan, someone said from the crowd. It was Mike Harris, the city building inspector, usually smug, always in a hurry. Daniel turned slowly. Mike. Mike took off his ball cap, rubbing the back of his neck like a kid caught in a lie. Look, I was wrong about you. Thought you were just another guy trying to stay afloat. Never realized how solid you are. Real respect, man. Daniel nodded once. Thanks. No swelling pride. No smug grin. Just that quiet calm. As he turned to leave, another voice stopped him. Deeper. Firmer. Mr. Brooks. Councilman Langston. He stood near the podium now, straightening his tie like it could shield him from the discomfort creeping into his face. The man looked smaller without a microphone. I misjudged you, Langston said. We all did. Daniel waited, said nothing. Langston stepped forward, then paused. If you're willing, I'd like to talk about how the city can work with your foundation. I think your insight could really help. Daniel tilted his head slightly. You don't want a guy like me making decisions, remember? Langston swallowed. I was wrong. A beat. Daniel gave a small nod. I'm not a politician, but I'll speak for people who don't usually get asked. Langston nodded back, his face softening in a way Daniel hadn't seen before. Humility not forced but real. Later, outside the center, Daniel sat on the back bumper of his truck, watching Lily chase the other kids around the cracked parking lot. The fall air had turned gold in the late afternoon light, catching on the rusted metal of the truck's bed and the strands of his daughter's hair as she ran. Evelyn approached quietly. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, arms folded, watching the same scene. You look tired, she said finally. Daniel shrugged. Long day. But something's different, she said. You carry it differently now. He didn't answer right away, just reached for the travel mug of coffee on the tailgate and took a sip. You didn't have to do any of this, he said finally. The foundation, the speech, all of it. Evelyn smiled faintly. You didn't have to help me that morning either. He looked at her. I didn't know who you were. That's the point. A breeze passed between them. She looked out toward Lily. She's lucky to have you, Evelyn said. I'm the lucky one. They stood in silence again, and this time it wasn't heavy. It was full of understanding, of everything unspoken. Then a voice called from across the lot, Mrs. Lot, the retired school nurse. Daniel, you still good with water heaters? Mine's making a noise like a raccoon with bronchitis. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, I'll swing by tomorrow. A teenage boy lingered behind her. Someone Daniel didn't recognize. He looked nervous, then stepped forward. Mr. Brooks? The kid said. Daniel looked up. I'm trying to get into trade school. Don't really have anyone to talk to about that kind of stuff. I heard what you said, what you did. Would you ever, be open to showing me the ropes sometime? Daniel smiled. Yeah, I'd be glad to. The kid lit up. Evelyn watched all this unfold, her expression soft. See, she said, you've already changed things. Daniel looked around, at the community center that would soon be rebuilt, at the people who now saw him not as a man surviving, but as someone worth listening to. At his daughter, laughing like she'd never known struggle. He didn't need applause. He didn't need titles. He just needed this quiet respect, earned through action, not noise. And in that moment, Daniel Brooks, once invisible, always steady, became the center of something much bigger than himself. Not because he chased it, but because he lived it. 6 months later, the parking lot behind the old community center didn't creak when you walked on it anymore. The cracks had been filled, the weeds cut back. Fresh paint gleamed on the brick walls, and the Brooks Community Center sign hung proudly above the double doors. Wooden letters carved by local teens in the shop Daniel now ran. Inside, it smelled like new beginnings. The gym floor was polished. The heating worked for the first time in years. Laughter echoed from the back classrooms, where single parents met for budgeting workshops. Free childcare hummed with soft lullabies, and a small trades training program had quietly begun under Daniel's guidance. He hadn't wanted his name on the building, but Evelyn had insisted, not for attention, for recognition, for the quiet dads, the exhausted moms, the people doing the hard work in silence. She wanted them to know this place was built by someone just like them. Daniel stood in the workshop room, showing a group of teens how to wire a basic outlet box. His hands moved with ease, like he was just passing along muscle memory. Always double-check the breakers off, he said, tapping the wall gently. Electricity doesn't give second chances. They listened. All of them, even the ones who usually didn't. He didn't bark orders, didn't pretend to know everything. He just showed up, every day, steady. Out in the hallway, Evelyn stood with a local reporter from Channel 6 News. He's here most mornings before the sun, she said, smiling as she glanced through the window. Doesn't ask for anything, but everyone knows they're safe with him. The reporter scribbled a note. So he runs the program now? He is the program, she said. This place beats because of him. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat on a bench just outside the center. The garden beside him, once overgrown and brittle, was alive again. Daffodils, tomatoes, sunflowers planted by Lily's third-grade class. Bees hovered lazily in the warm breeze. Lily sat cross-legged on the grass, reading aloud from a library book to 2 younger kids who didn't even know how to spell their own names yet. She read slowly so they could follow, like her dad had taught her. Daniel watched her, sipping black coffee from his old dented travel mug. The one thing he hadn't traded in for something newer. Some things you keep, not because they're shiny, but because they've carried you through. Evelyn joined him again, this time without fanfare. No camera crews, no entourage, just 2 people sitting in sunlight watching something grow. I went by the office, she said. Cleaned out the last of my desk. You done for good? She nodded. Yeah, I realized, if the people at the top won't change, maybe it's time I stop trying to change them, and just start building new things with better people. Daniel smiled at that. You could build anything. She looked at him. So could you. He didn't answer, but the corners of his mouth tugged upward. She handed him a small envelope. Inside, a folded letter, typed this time, on Hale Foundation letterhead. An official offer. Board leadership. Funding control. Full autonomy for expanding the Brooks programs across 3 neighboring counties. He read it once, twice, then folded it back up. I'll think about it, he said. She grinned. That's more than I expected. That evening, after the center closed, Daniel walked Lily home through their neighborhood. Same streets, same sky, but the weight on his shoulders had changed. Neighbors waved. One man stopped him about a furnace. Another woman asked if her son could shadow him next week. They all looked at him now, not through him. And when they got to their building, Lily stopped at the mailbox and tugged on his sleeve. Daddy. Yeah. I told my teacher I want to be like you when I grow up. He knelt beside her. You want to build houses? She shook her head. No. I want to help people feel safe. He blinked, swallowed hard, nodded. You're already doing that. She smiled, hugged him, then bounded up the stairs. Daniel stood for a moment under the porch light. Same building, same door, but everything had changed, because he had given when he had nothing. And now, without ever asking, he had more than he needed. Not money, not fame, but roots, community, respect. And every day he quietly showed others what real strength looked like. Not loud, not flashy, just steady and real. Some heroes don't wear capes. They wear flannel shirts and carry lunchboxes. And sometimes they save lives just by being exactly who they are. Have you ever done something kind, not knowing how much it mattered? Daniel didn't expect anything, but his quiet act changed a life. Maybe yours could, too. Tell us. Have you ever helped someone? Or been helped? When it mattered most? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us. Goodness is still out there. Thank you for watching, and for being part of the story.